Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters. Welcome to this week's live chat. I sure have missed you all. It's been a couple weeks since I've been able to do the live chat. I did try 2 weeks ago, a very failed attempt to give you like a live look into what was going on at the event space we had. And then last week I was in Handy Quilter Academy doing some presentations for them. And so again, just kind of got crazy. But I'm here today, super excited, and we have a lot to cover. So in this live chat, I'm going to talk about tips for quilting the optional border panel and recapping some of the previous videos and telling you about a deal and a giveaway, so some fun stuff. But first, you have to know there's a very, very special guest here hanging out with us. So do you want to come over here real quick? This is my nephew Elliot, and he is here acting as my live chat assistant. Can you say hi to everybody?
Hi.
Isn't he the cutest? Who is your favorite aunt in the whole wide world?
You.
There we go. Thank you, bud. Jessica's not here today, so I will try to monitor the chat for questions, but don't worry, I'll be back next week, and she'll be back next week, and I can help you answer them there. But I have written some down, so we're going to just jump right into it. Before we get to the recap or the what we're going to talk about, I want to tell you some good news, everybody. If you have been waiting for the Glide thread cards to get back in stock, they finally are back in stock. It's been a minute. How happy does that make me? I love seeing all the colors. Anyway, just for my live chatters, you can get 20% off of this using promo code thread card. And so let me show you a little graphic on that. So it's a really great way to see the threads that you have, to kind of think through, like help pick out threads for your quilts you might have going on. And so there we go, you can see promo code thread card, 20% off. But that's only good through till tomorrow. So you have to make sure to take advantage of that if you want. I like to go through and kind of just figure out what colors I want to play with. So pretty fun. You can click the link in the description box below if you want to get that, or you can scan this QR code if you want. But one lucky winner is going to get this thread card. So all you have to do is, after my live chat is over, leave a comment on the video telling me what your favorite go-to thread color is, and I'll pick a winner next week in next week's live chat. So again, you can find the link in the description box or leave a comment after the live chat is over. So if you're watching live right now, don't do it yet. Wait for it. Wait till it's over. All right, so in this live chat, like I said, we have a lot to cover. First of all, the optional border panel that some of you purchased with the panel, the Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along panel. I have some quilting suggestions for that area. It's funny because I almost thought, oh, do I really need to make a border panel for a borders quilt? But anyway, it's a lot of fun, and it was a little bit of a brain stumper, like brain teaser, trying to figure out what to do in that area. So again, if you are quilting along with me on the panel, and if you purchase the optional borders, then you have this. If not, no worries, these tips will hopefully help you in other areas. But when I'm looking at my quilts, and if the center of the quilt is really ornate and really beautiful, I try to keep the quilting fairly basic or simple for me in the borders. The idea being, I don't need to do difficult stuff over the whole quilt. I can kind of pick and choose. And with this particular border panel, those border strips that you see around the outside, I'd kind of envisioned a pieced border. So I was kind of, thinking, how would I quilt this if it were actually pieced? And so I came up with 2 different suggestions for you. The first would be to use some dot-to-dot quilting in that irregular area. So in that light cream colored background, you can tell those are irregular shapes. It's kind of hard to fit something perfectly in that space. So instead of trying to fit it in there, I just quilted a triangle and then added another line inside of it. A little bit of continuous curve in the green, and I love how it just kind of creates an interesting looking thing, but nice and fast. Now I actually took a little video so you can kind of see what this looks like on my long arm. On my long arm, if I'm doing a diagonal line of any length, I'm going to use a ruler, but on a sewing machine that might not be necessary. And what I love about this technique is I can easily and quickly quilt that design without marking it out. So quilting a couple of chevrons and then traveling over and stitching along the fake seam or stitching in the ditch. We know I like to do that. And then a little bit of continuous curve just for fun. So that's an option for you if you want something that's kind of quick and easy for that area. Continuous curve is just that line that curves out from point to point, and it's kind of a nice option for you there. And then in the other areas, I just put some swirls or some different designs. But here you can see it's just gonna give us a little bit of a different look, but again, nothing too complex, nothing too ornate, just keeping it kind of nice and simple. Or you can go with piano keys. Now, piano keys are just straight lines that look like, well, piano keys. They're really great for adding a little bit of texture to the border. It's great if you don't want something that you don't want movement, you don't want anything that really draws attention, you just want to, have a nice, beautiful look. And if we think about this border strip, if it's pieced, or in this instance, kind of fake pieced, I can use those seams as a guide. And so when I'm working with something like piano keys, I love to put it in borders where I don't have to measure anything out. I can just use the seams as my guideline. Now, because I get very bored very easily, I can't do just straight lines, so I had to throw in some wishbones every now and then just to kind of give it that little bit of a different look, just to keep it interesting. Of course, you don't have to do that. You could just totally skip those ribbon candy, and the result is it's going to be a nice, beautiful border that's not going to draw attention away from that beautiful motif we put in the center of our panel. And I have a couple other pictures a little bit more up close that you can see it. So again, you don't have to do difficult stuff over the whole quilt. It doesn't have to be over the top to be impactful. So by being able to put a little bit here and there, just, makes it nice without, taking forever. So of course in that area, it's about an inch on the larger panel, depending on which border panel you got. But you could do serpentine lines, ribbon candy, whatever design is easy for you or something that you feel like would add nice texture with those straight lines. So I know nothing groundbreaking as far as design ideas, but definitely lots of fun. Now here we can see I kind of combined the piano keys in the pieced part with the dot-to-dot chevron in the cream part. And this picture is so edited because I want you to see the quilting, but the thread blends in so much it's really hard to see. But that's a great thing because I can just see the pretty texture and it's going to look nice. But it kind of shows you a little bit of combining the two. Now, if you want a challenge, if you want in that pieced kind of chevron area, you can quilt serpentine lines. But let me tell you, it's not easy because that side is so irregular and it moves around so much. And it was really difficult for me to get a good picture of it. Hopefully, throughout some of these pictures, you'll kind of get the idea of what I've done there. So if I look at that pieced part that makes that chevron, I can pretend it's like a border and then quilting those serpentine lines from side to side. But it's like turning the corner and then turning the corner and then turning. So it's not going to be like an easy option, so just keep that in mind. I don't want anybody cussing me out while you're trying to quilt that, but it does look cool and adds a nice little bit of curvy movement to that area. Of course, you can just do an all-over design. Do swirls over the border. Do something that feels comfortable because we've really kind of stretched ourselves past our comfort zone probably in some of these areas of the quilt. Now it's time to just relax and have some fun with the quilting. All right. So that is the border design options. Now I want to spend a little bit of time recapping some of the previous videos. So we've actually have 3 different videos to go over, and I'm just going to kind of hit some of those high points. Again, if you have specific questions, you can leave them in the comments and I'll be sure to answer them next week. Or next week's live chat is going to be Ask Me Anything. So we're just going to do all the questions because Jessica will be here. We'll hit all those things. But on our quilt, the last video tutorial that we ended up on was the swirl chain. This is where we're pulling everything together that we've learned, pulling it all into one spot, turning the corner, using the filler, adding the echoing, and this design is so fun. If you can get the hang of it, it's not difficult, but once you kind of internalize it and get it, I like to say it's like a party trick because it's easy to do, but people are super impressed. And it's easy to like embellish and do some fun stuff with. So if you've been wondering, should I bother trying to learn it? Yes, you should, because it's a great one. So with a swirl chain, we're basically quilting the same shape over and over and over again. We're just alternating direction. And that is the tricky part. Because our brain is like, I got it, and I don't got it, and then I got it. It's that mirror image that can throw us off. But instead of getting frustrated, just know that once you get it, it's going to be great. And then again, I said this in the video tutorial. You can check out my YouTube channel to see all that. Echo, echo, echo. You cannot quilt just a little part of that and then judge how it looks. You need to finish filling in that area, and then you can nicely see what you think about it. I was telling everybody at Handy Quilter Academy when I was teaching this, you can't take it out of context. You can't quilt a couple bits of the swirl chain and be like, oh, that's not good. Angela doesn't know what she's talking about. I'm telling you, you have to keep filling in around it, and I promise when you're done, it's going to look great. So with a swirl chain, very echo heavy. It's not the size of the swirls that determines the density, it's the spacing between the lines. And if you've heard any of my videos, you know I say that about 1,000,000 times, but it's true. That means on a sewing machine, my swirls might be a little bit shorter, but the spacing between the lines is going to be the same. So it doesn't matter how big that swirl is, doesn't matter how long or curvy, just echo, echo, echo. Then in the tutorial, I talked about how to turn the corner with it. It's actually pretty easy once you get the hang of it. I know some of you are watching this like, it's not, Walter, stop saying that. What I mean by easy is the concept on how to turn the corner is pretty easy to grasp. And then you get to take it and refine it and find your own quilting style. But for this, we're just quilting that swirl chain until it crosses over an imaginary line that joins my inner border corner and my outer border corner. And then my next swirl chain is going to go the next direction. So in the video, I show you what that looks like. But what's really cool about this design is it can really be embellished. You can make it as basic as you want or as over the top as you want, depending on what you want to have happen. So here in this example, I've thrown in some feathers and some paisleys just to give it, I don't know, a little bit of a different look. But just know that you can make it over the top or you can pare it down and make it easy. It's totally up to you. Now, if you look in this lighter blue border, that right there is just the swirl chain without all the echo lines. See that swirl that kind of changes direction? That changing or looking away from each other is what helps them kind of hook together nicely. And I just didn't do any echo lines on here. So again, same design, different result depending on the border you put it in. So we have seen this before during previous tutorials where we did it as an all over or kind of as an element, but here's for the first time we're seeing it in a border. And so it really is one of those versatile designs that works in a lot of different areas. But if you're quilting it in a border, eventually you're going to have to join them together, especially if you're quilting it so that it wraps all the way around. And one of the struggles about teaching what I love is I know some of the frustrations you're going to head into. Some of them you'll figure out, but this one, getting them to hook together, this is a pretty slick way to do it. So if we look at this picture, and I have a video to show you in just a second, I have my two swirl chains that are ending, and I have them spread apart a little bit, a couple inches. Don't run them all the way up next to each other because I'm going to add that echo line that you can see in between them as a way to kind of glue it together. Now the result is when I'm done, and you'll see it's pretty cool, is one continuous looking swirl chain, but you'll know we hooked them together. So here we can see that's the finished product after the two have been joined. So I don't think you would notice, maybe you would if you saw it in the whole quilt, but if you stood back, I don't think anybody would see that's where they hook together. So this is a great example that echoing is your best quilting friend. Just add more echo lines, keep filling it in until it looks good, and then you can move on. All right, so in this video, I just did a quick little video to show you, you can see the two swirls separate from each other, and then an echo line that goes from one side to the other side, but on the opposite side. I want to kind of crisscross. That's the glue that's gonna hold it together. And then, well, echo, echo, echo. So I'm gonna fill in that gap with some echo lines and maybe add some other details and just kind of build that up to where it looks continuous. And here I kind of cheat through and kind of get down to the next side to do the same on the other side. I'm not worried if it runs into the edge like it does here. I'm not even worried that it has a different number of echoes than the rest. I'm just trying to get the overall look of one continuous swirl chain. And then once I'm done with that, I can start filling in the space around it with the design and finish that up. Now in the video, I don't think I really got to stress this, but what you put around a design is just as important as the design itself. If I really want it to show up, I really want it to be a main focal element, I'm gonna do something like wishbones or back and forth lines that are really gonna make it like, wow, show up. But if you quilt it and you're like, oh, don't love it so much, or maybe it's just something you don't want it to be such a main element on your quilt, then we can just put more echo lines. And it's gonna give us beautiful texture without the swirl chain standing out so much. So now that we've seen that, we'll talk about other ways you can join it. So if the thought of like trying to hook those two together just blows your mind, well, we can just skip that. And in this example, I've kind of quilted my swirl chains so that they branch out and put a motif right in the middle. So you don't have to try to quilt them so that they connect. Whatever you do, as long as it looks intentional, it's gonna look fine. Now, if you're sitting there like, I don't know what she's talking about, just know that you can connect the swirl chain, or you can quilt it so that it kind of branches out of at the center of the quilt, just to give it that motif look. Now, like I said, you can use this in so many different ways, and so I have a couple of examples. These are just my persuasive argument to make you love this design as much as I do. It's almost like I'm just showing you cute pictures of my kids and being like, oh, look, there's my kid doing something cute here. But this is the same basic design, same swirl chain, with just a lot more embellishment, right? So not as many echoes, a lot more detail around it. And what's really fun about this design is it's quilted in sections, but it looks continuous. So if I want to turn the corner or want to move it around an area, I can just by quilting my sections in different directions. So again, I know this is over the top, but this is just showing you, hey, this is why you should learn this design. It's a lot of fun. And then again, what you put around it will determine how much it shows up. If I had quilted a couple of those swirl chains and I didn't love it, I would not put all those tiny, tiny bubbles and pebbles and little designs around it. I would put more echo lines and do something really stunning somewhere else in the quilt. So again, the idea of what you put around it is so important. And I know I keep saying this, but I know when we're new at something, especially something like swirls, and we quilt it and we get frustrated with ourselves, you've got to keep going, I promise. Keep going, fill it in, it's gonna look fine. Now, like I said, we have seen this before. We saw it in the Flora and Foliage Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along. So if you want to check out other video tutorials on the same design, maybe I say something different or something will click, just check out my YouTube channel for that swirl chain. But you can see here the filler in between, just a dense swirl. It's not gonna make them stand out as much as like the wishbone, but it is gonna make them stand out more than just echo lines. So what you put around it can even be kind of a sliding scale. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It could be kind of in the middle, again, depending on how you want to show up. And again, example, more filler around it. In this instance, I did want it to show up. I did want it to kind of stand out. So more elongated swirls around it, except I just did smaller density. So that contrast in the density or the shape or the direction, that contrast is what lets us see the difference between the two. And I love saying contrast because it sounds like I'm artsy, but it just means different. I just need something different around it. I don't have an art degree or anything like that. I have a degree in fast food with a minor in French fries. So take my opinion for what it's worth. But one great practical practice that you could do is quilt a swirl chain in a row across your quilt and try some different fillers around it and see the different effects you get. So for instance, this swirl chain on this portion of it, which I quilted the whole big long, so this is like a little section of it, some back and forth lines. I mean, those are like, hey, check this out. Like that's kind of really like, look here. That's gonna be on the end where I really want to show up, right? I wanna show off that swirl chain or detract from another mistake I made somewhere else. But here we can see swirls that are more similar in size, similar in shape, and I just have that pretty texture of the swirl chain without it being like, whoa, swirl chain. So with that, we kind of ended the border part of our quilt. So again, the 3 or 4 videos that we kind of played with the borders, we talked about turning the corner, different design options, motifs, how to make it easy option. And then the last videos of the series are about finishing our panel. So with all my videos, you don't have to purchase the coordinating panel to quilt with it, but if you want to, you can quilt along with me. And so part of the panel featured a center square and some pretty watercolor flowers. And so in the next video, we talked about how can we quilt those flowers? How do we pick designs? Because I know sometimes we purchase fabric because it's so striking and so beautiful. We just want it, but then we don't know how to quilt it. And so in that video, I gave a couple different options, whether you quilt around the lines of the design or whether you use the design for inspiration. And then we also talked about background filler. So in this particular picture, this was the example or the quilt I quilted with the thread that kind of blended in. So you can see around those flowers in that background area, you can see some different textures, some different designs. Using a thread color that blends in is gonna cover a multitude of sins, quilting sins. It's going to give you that beautiful texture without letting you see every single unintentional bobble. So very, very important, especially when I'm doing something like this dense and filler in the back. But in the video, I'm using a contrasting thread so that you can see what I'm doing. So I like to show both so you can see like, okay, this is what it would actually look with all that background filler in a thread color that blends in. or here. So you can see just that pale mist there. If you bought the coordinating thread collection, great option right there, or linen if you want to blend in all the way. And we can see more detail around that. So when I'm looking at something like this big, beautiful fabric, I'm also imagining that it's applique, right? And for applique, I want to use echoing to separate it from the filler. I want to add some texture and interest, but I don't want the quilting in the background to take away from the pretty, pretty elements that I'm quilting it around. So again, the matching thread color will really help with that. Now this is the one that we saw in the video with that contrasting thread. So if you want to bear all of your quilting, you can do a dark thread on light fabric and it will show you everything. But in a video, that's good. Or in a practice piece, that's good. Maybe not necessarily for our quilts that we have laying around. But in the video, I talked about how I added an echo line just for fun, just for S's and G's, stitches and giggles, of course, and added some echoing and some different designs. This is meant to be an opportunity for you to play. But I know that some quilters are like, I need a set number of steps. I need to know what to do. So echo around the elements a couple times and just fill in any of those weird irregular areas with echo lines or any design that feels comfortable quilting. And just like we saw with the borders, you don't have to do custom stuff. You could just do an all over design in this area. Totally fine. I'm just trying to think of teachable moments to put in the tutorial. So whether you echo it and put a bunch of designs, or whether you just quilt some swirls in there and call it good, that's gonna be perfect. But then we get to the flowers. And so this is really fun, but I know it can be scary for some quilters, especially if it's our favorite out of print fabric or our favorite, fabric I don't have enough of, I don't wanna ruin it. So with this flower, one of the things I talked about was quilting around the details in the fabric. The fabric designer has already done all the work. All you have to do is quilt along the lines. And what's really fun, really great about the flower is it's a recognizable shape. No matter what you put on there, it's gonna look like a flower because it's on a flower. So that should take some of the pressure off, hopefully. But in this example, I'm quilting along just some of those lines that are in the fabric design, kind of creating that petal look. And in this example, which this wasn't one that I filmed, this is one I just quilted to take a picture of, I did two different colors. I did a darker blue and a lighter blue. Of course, you don't have to, you can just do one thread color, but I like lots of threads, what can I say? And when I'm doing something that's more, I'm gonna say organic, but it's, something that's watercolor or loose, I can make those lines wiggly. They don't have to fit that perfectly. I just getting it close and moving on. This is a good thing. This is like having a path to follow. And one question that came up, Rebecca mentioned in the type chat before we started that they've been experimenting with pounce pads and stencils, and it's really been helping. What are my thoughts on that? That's great. When you have a path or a line to follow, it just takes some of the question or the guesswork out of it. It's like driving a car, right? If I have my Google Maps up, it'll tell me where to go. It just takes some of the questions out of it. So having that path to follow, whether it's a stencil, whether it's the design on the quilt, but you can't be so rigid that you're afraid to mess up. Just get those lines wiggly, get it close, and move on. And I know right now, like, there's some of you out there that's like, no, not gonna do it. But let me tell you, that fabric is so bold, it's gonna not show the quilting very much anyway. Or we can use the fabric as inspiration. So it's kind of the same thing, but I'm just trying to make some talking points. It's a flower, so let's put a flower quilting design on it. Let's make it easy. If anybody ever shows me a quilt made out of Kaif fabric, I'm like, do a flower quilting design, right? Flowers all over it. So we don't have to make it difficult. Let the fabric point you in a direction. So this is just a flower design. We saw how to quilt that in the video tutorial, and I talked about some options, and we're gonna see that thing again here in just a little bit, spoiler alert. And then even just wavy lines. So if you're quilting along with me on that panel, try a different one in each flower, or try just one, but know that when you step back, the quilting just kind of disappears and all you see is that pretty flower. I tell people it's kind of like looking through a fence at a baseball game, right? When I'm watching Ellett pitch, it's a great little pitcher, I'm just looking through the fence. I don't really see the fence anymore. I'm kind of looking through it to see him. So try not to worry too much about it, because when you step back, you're just gonna have that pretty overall texture. And then even in the littler flowers, adding just some fun details, having fun with it, trying to stay loose and not stressing out too much. We've got enough things to worry about in life. I don't think that quilting should be one of them. So again, just kind of a close-up picture, and this quilt is a mishmash of different thread colors, just depending on what was going on. So there's the gold in the flowers, just depending on how I worked around it. All right, and then we're getting ready to land this plane. Thank you for hanging out this long. The center of the quilt. Now, when we're quilting and we're talking about how to quilt on like a sewing machine, the question is always, where should I start? When you have made your quilt sandwich and you're quilting on a sit down situation where you're moving the fabric and not the machine, you can start anywhere you want. Now, I normally start in the center because it's never going to be heavier than it is right then. But in this video series, we saved it for last, and that's okay, you can totally do that. But just know that with any of my videos, any of the video series or those tutorials, they stay on my YouTube channel indefinitely. So you can come back and work backwards or work in the order that makes more sense for you. Now on a long arm, we're working very much in lines down the quilt, so I'm always starting from the top there. Just a couple things to keep in mind. But when we're looking at the center of the quilt, usually, all things equal, if I'm gonna put some custom quilting or put some more detailed quilting in an area, it's usually going to be in the center because that's where we tend to look. So in that big, beautiful blank square in the center of our panel, I showed you two different options for using simple shapes or other designs to create wow. And so we're pulling out that feather design, that flower design, sorry. We're pulling out that flower design and we're using it more like a motif. Now, I used contrasting thread so you can see it, but I don't hate how it looks. So I might have actually done that on one of my quilts maybe. So in this example, I am plotting, just kind of placing some flowers in the center, grouping them together kind of like a bouquet. I didn't worry too much about the placement of, I just kind of like, I'll start one there, but you could totally mark it out if you wanted to. And I thought 4 was a good number. I should have stopped at 3, but I had this weird like gap, so I just went with 4. And then once I have that as my motif or my focal element, then I can fill in around it with other designs. And this is totally up to you, of course. I went with leaves and some swirly shapes just because, I mean, it makes sense, like flowers and leaves. And then to really help those flowers stand out, I used a different color thread for that part. So the filler blends in with the background, those flowers kind of pop out, and even though it is dense and it's contrasting, I don't think it takes away too much from the overall quilt. And since I'm not doing it everywhere, just kind of being very particular about where I put it, I think the result is really nice. And with any of the designs that we've learned, you can make this as complex or as easy as you want. I could have just done one flower, I could have just done one flower and made it go really big, or I could have just done leaves in the center. There's no wrong answer. So it's like a choose your own quilting adventure that always ends in a happy ending. Another option we saw was how to pull out some shapes and create a motif. So we were kind of touching on motifs, but not feather motifs. I was trying to come up with some different examples, maybe something unexpected. And so in the video tutorial, I talk about quilting the center one and building off of it. And as long as it's symmetrical, I think it'll look great. So not perfect, doesn't have to be perfect, but whatever I do in one corner, I'm gonna do in the other corner. And again, in the filming, I'm using that contrasting thread so you can see what I'm doing. But in this example, you can see what it looks like when the thread color matches a little bit more. So this example is with the gold thread. Still a little contrast, but not so much. So it kind of gives you the little bit of a different look. So again, we kind of hit all those things throughout the video series. And when we hit this point, when it's over, I'm kind of sad, but I'm also kind of happy. I'm tired. Doing the videos is so much fun, but just getting everything out. But we will be doing another free motion challenge quilting along. I've already seen a question come up on the Facebook group. It was like, when's the next one? I'm like, it's coming. We're tentatively looking at September-ish. So anyway, excited about that. Again, Jessica's not here, so I'll kind of peek over and look at the questions. I'm not going to dig through them because I will do next week's live chat. We'll just be Ask Me Anything. We'll answer any question you have. If I don't know the answer, I'll just make up an answer. I'm pretty good at making it up. But one question did come through on the type chat. So when I do the live chat, I like to get on there about half an hour before and type chat and connect with everybody. It's fun. We are in a little group. We feel like we know each other. But Betsy said, Angela, you have given me permission to travel, and boy, doesn't it help. So traveling or quilting along a seam or a previously quilted line is just a really handy way to get from one thing to the next. And for me, it's all about momentum. Can I keep that momentum going? Because if I stop, if I have to tie off, I'm gonna get distracted by something and walk away. I know myself. That doesn't mean you can't. I mean, you could do whatever you want, of course, but I always love it when people are like, yeah, I listened to you and that was a good point. So I'm glad you like that, Betsy. All right, I know normally I answer more questions live. Again, join me next Thursday for the Ask Me Anything live chat. And truly, if you don't have any questions, I'll just make up the ones I want you to ask me. And then don't forget, if you want to win the thread card after the live chat is over, leave a comment telling me your go-to thread color. Although it's hard to pick one, isn't it? If I had to pick one, I'd probably say Yellow Whisper. But and I will pick a winner at next week's live chat. Or if you want to get one, 20% off, promo code thread card. Click the link in the description box below. All right, everybody, thank you so much for those of you that have quilted along with me through the Free Motion Challenge, quilting along. Those of you that are just joining, I love it. Whether or not you get a chance to quilt, I know real life gets in the way, and I'm glad that you are here listening to me and hanging out with me. Well, I hope you guys all stay cool. It's been warm in several areas. I hope you stay cool, and I'll see you next week for the Ask Me Anything live chat. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.